This podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Bogosity. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/Bogosity. Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the 23rd of May 2016, the podcast that's the pompous of love. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me again is Charles Thomas. Charlie, welcome back to the show.
I'm back with a brand new computer, and hopefully it won't die on me this time.
Let's atomic wedgie the news of the bogus. Way back in the original Bogosity series, I pointed out the scientific data showing that driving under the influence of marijuana just isn't anywhere near as dangerous as driving drunk, and may even be a wash given the overcautious behavior of people high on marijuana. Well, now that we've had marijuana legalized in Colorado and other places, the state police have wanted to ticket people for driving high just as if they were driving drunk. All for the purpose of making money for the state, making us all safer on the roads. The problem is the science continues to be against them, and this time there's a study from AAA that concludes that all legal tests to determine if someone is driving under the influence of marijuana should be scrapped completely.
Well, people don't care about facts, it's feelings. Because these people are still like, well, I still feel that marijuana is still a gateway drug. I still feel that it will destroy families. Again, it's feelings.
So what they're saying is, and this is from the AAA Safety Foundation, they were trying to set it up like a breathalyzer test or an alcohol blood test, where if it's 0.08 or above, then you're impaired. If it's less than that, you're fine. And there's been a lot of questions about that in the scientific literature, but according to AAA, it's even worse when you're talking about a threshold for THC. In 5 of the 6 states that have legalized marijuana, they automatically presume that a driver is impaired if they test higher than the limit, and not impaired if it's lower. But what they're saying is that this may result in drivers who are unsafe going free, while others who are perfectly safe are wrongly convicted.
Wow.
So what AAA says to do is replace this with actual indicators of intoxication like pupil dilation, tongue color, and a bunch of other things. In my opinion, there should really only be one test for this or any other traffic violation. Are you actually driving recklessly? Is the way you're driving indicative of someone who isn't paying attention or whose perception is messed up or whatever the unsafe behavior for whatever reason, be it alcohol, marijuana, or just being sleepy?
Yeah, and it should be a really big test. Like if you're driving unsafe and causing people harm, I think it would be a lot more simpler, a lot more easier, and you'll probably save us more tax dollars and more time for the cops to actually go after real criminals.
So according to AAA President and CEO Marshall Doney, quote, "There is understandably a strong desire by both lawmakers and the public to create legal limits for marijuana impairment in the same manner we do alcohol. In the case of marijuana, this approach is flawed and not supported by scientific research." And those flaws include the fact that the level of THC that results in impairment varies widely from one individual to another. You have some people who could have a high level of THC in their system without being impaired, especially if they're regular users, while others with lower levels might be unsafe. Also, the level of THC dissipates fairly rapidly. And when they take you for the blood test, it might take a couple of hours because they have to take you downtown, they have to get a warrant, and by that time, a lot of the THC levels can be taken out. But also, a lot of states are looking at the presence of THC metabolites and using that as evidence when those metabolites can stay in your body for weeks after you smoke the marijuana.
So at the end of the day, this test is completely and utterly pointless.
So according to New York University professor Mark A.R. Kleiman, quote, "A law against driving with THC in your bloodstream is not a law you can know you are obeying except by never smoking marijuana or never driving." And he also cited the risks involved with marijuana in a crash, and he pointed out that using marijuana and driving roughly will double the risk of a crash. However, talking on a hands-free cell phone while driving, which is legal in all 50 states, will quadruple your crash risk. And that's something else that people do with statistics. They like scaring you. Oh, twice as many accidents involve marijuana than before these laws were passed. But, a lot of times involving marijuana just means that they found that one of the drivers had been using it, regardless of whether or not that was the driver that caused the crash, or that driver could have even done something to avoid the crash.
Yeah, again, it's fear. It's like we have to scare people with these big things. Like, this is going to kill you. That's going to kill you. It's interesting. It says right here, Kilman says, quote, driving with a noisy child in the back of a car is about as dangerous as using marijuana and driving.
As a parent, I believe it. But a lot of this is completely correlational. And okay, twice as many people involved in a crash were using marijuana. But if twice as many people smoke marijuana overall, that would mean that marijuana made no difference at all. If more than twice as many people smoke marijuana, that would indicate that they're actually less likely to be involved in a crash. So always remember the operative question with statistics: compared to what? Say, if you're tired of the promos in this podcast, well, the patrons got it early and with no ads or promos. Just go to patreon.bogosity.tv and donate at any level. Hackers, terrorists, the NSA. But I repeat myself. Your online security is under attack, and the weakest point is your password. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass plugs into your browser and allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords anywhere on the web, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers and all your computers, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, membership info, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications and even mobile devices, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now. Last year, the FCC idiotically passed rules that made it very difficult for router manufacturers to allow users to install their own firmware. And firmware is kind of like the software in the router, except since it's on a chip instead of a hard drive or whatever, it's called firmware. And you really should be checking your router for firmware updates every so often. But a lot of people like using open source firmware like OpenWRT or DDWRT because it has a lot more features, and also, what if the manufacturer stops supporting that model of router? You can still get the updates from these open source projects. So if you don't do that, then you're just putting yourself and others at risk of attacks resulting from unpatched security flaws. I think it was a couple of Christmases ago, like the day after Christmas, all these Xbox and PlayStations, I think it was, were hit with DDoS attacks. That was done from insecure routers.
Wow, the more you know.
So now, two of the major router manufacturers, Asus and Linksys, and I cannot say enough good things about Asus, they're a great company, they say that they're going to continue to allow consumers to update the router with custom firmware. So this first link from Ars Technica focuses on Linksys, and they've been collaborating with their chip maker Marvell and also the makers of OpenWRT to make sure that people can continue to do this, as opposed to another example, TP-Link, which is a smaller router company, which is just going to disallow people from installing custom firmware altogether, which is bad because, like I say, what if they stop supporting it and you're not able to update your router? So the rule in question is that if you have a router that is dual band, traditionally, Wi-Fi routers have operated in the 2.4 gigahertz band, which is wide open. The FCC recently started allowing them to use the 5 gigahertz band as well. However, those are also used for the FAA's Doppler weather systems.
Oh, that's going to cause so much fun, right?
Well, that's what they're saying, that if you're operating in the same frequencies as these nearby radar installations, then you need to be specifically set up to avoid that. But with this custom firmware, they can disable this. It's called dynamic frequency selection. And the FCC has called this a, quote, major cause of harmful interference. Now, just think about how far your router doesn't go when you go outside your home. I seriously doubt that it's home Wi-Fi routers that are causing this.
I think, again, if the FCC didn't meddle, we probably wouldn't be in this situation, right?
Yeah.
Government. Solving a problem that wasn't even there, and when it does solve it, 10 more problems come up.
Yeah, and I mean, like, why can't the FAA Doppler systems do this same kind of dynamic frequency selection when they find interference? Oh, we'll just move to an unused portion.
But then, they'll find another thing.
And also, just from a standpoint of the law of physics, it's harder for 5 gigahertz signals to go outside the walls of your home than it is for a 2.4 gigahertz. The lower frequency is better at penetrating walls, so... Yeah, I think if this is happening because of Wi-Fi stuff, it's probably because of the hobbyists that are kind of making their own hardware and custom antennas and things like that, not something that the normal person in his home is using.
So basically, when they say that, which is very interesting, I like this one, it says, the real benefit of open source is not breaking the rules and doing something with malicious intent. And they're trying to say this is what does something to customize their own, have their own personal settings. These people don't want to be harmful and anything else. And if they're doing anything that's harm, find them.
Yeah, go after the individuals who are causing the problem, not the router manufacturers.
Exactly. Again, it's like going after gun manufacturers, going after school shooting. I mean, that would be completely stupid. Oh, wait, that's actually happened.
Yep. So what Linksys is doing is for all routers sold on and after June 2nd, they will have all of their parameters for radio frequency transmissions in a separate memory location that the firmware can't access. So people will still be able to change all the other settings, they just won't be able to change the RF parameters, and therefore they'll stay in compliance with the FCC regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And according to Vince DeLuca, who's the Linksys router project manager, oh, you just quoted this. The real benefit of open source is not breaking the rules and doing something with malicious intent. The value of open source is being able to customize your router, to be able to do privacy browsing through Tor, being able to build an open VPN client, being able to strip down the firmware to do super lean, low latency gaming. It's not about, I'm going to go get Open WRT to go and piss off the FCC. It's about what you can do in expanding the capabilities of what we ship with.
Exactly. It's overcomplicating a very simple issue, which again, sadly, what governments do. They come in, they see a small problem, and they explode and makes it bigger, and then they sit there and saying, oh, well, how did this happen? And then, we just go keep chasing our tails until one of them say, maybe we should have done this originally, and then, well, it's already way too late.
And that's what OpenWRT developer Imre Kalaz said about punishing the people who are doing this and not going after the router manufacturers. But he said that these decisions, quote, have been made by lawyers who had not too much technical knowledge.
So business as usual.
Yeah, pretty much. And, I mean, it's just more of our government's guilty until proven innocent approach to regulations.
Oh, and we'll get to that more soon.
And also of how regulations hurt the small fry and make it so that only the big players like Linksys and ASUS can properly serve the public, and then the smaller router manufacturers can't really take the expense of doing that, so they just close everyone off from custom firmware altogether. So, like I said, I'm a big fan of ASUS. They make a lot of good routers, and they even make routers with DDWRT already installed, so you've already got the open source stuff. And they posted a statement where they said, quote, ASUS's idea is still following GNU, that is the free software licensing for open source software, opening the source code, and welcome third-party firmware. The firmware verification method will be modified in next formal firmware release. This firmware will not accept older firmware, and routers with this new firmware cannot downgrade to older version. So it will not accept third-party firmware for a short time. Please don't be afraid. When we finish the new method to protect the RF parameter, we will release firmware verification method to developers, and you can still, this is obviously, it's either translated from a non-English language or English isn't his first language, but he says, you can still using the web GUI to change to third-party firmware. So once they get all their ducks in a row and they're able to do what Linksys did, they'll be back to allowing this third-party firmware.
Again, they're doing all these hoops, and again, it's not going to solve anything, because I guarantee you hackers will still be able to hack.
Hackers gonna hack?
Yes, and will waste time in doing all these pointless things while actually not going after the criminals in any type of way and fashion.
If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. Before we go on to our next story, I just wanted to say very quickly, since we just had the BoxPN promo, for those of you who have been running it on Windows, they just came out with their new Windows client, and it's pretty sweet. The previous one was just a rebranded version of Viscosity, which was good, but this one is developed by BoxPN's parent company, Edelino Commerce, and it's pretty sweet. It even lets you choose which IP address you want to connect using, and that solves one issue people have been having with your VPN server's IP address being put on a blacklist. So you can't access a lot of websites because they think you're a spammer. So now if that's a problem, you can just use one of those websites that'll let you type in an IP address and see if it's been blacklisted, and use one that the blacklisters don't know about. So check it out, and remember, no matter what, please stay secure online. So let's take another look back, this time just a few years ago. We've been talking about all the problems in Venezuela and how they're the result of socialism. And of course, the burn victims and other socialists come back with, well, we want democratic socialism. That's totes different.
Yeah, changing the language, Every time a Venezuela story comes up, we just put the no Scotsman fallacy right there. Pretty much that's what people who pick through Venezuela say, that's not real socialism.
Well, the problem is the whole point of Venezuelan socialism was to implement modern 21st century democratic socialism and prove to the whole world that it works. Which of course it doesn't, but we've got a pair of articles from 2013 that show quite clearly that, just like the Soviet Union before it, before all of these problems became apparent and undeniable, these same socialists were praising Venezuela for doing it right. And the first is from our favorite website, Salon.com.
Oh, the title here is just, oh goodness gracious. Just Hugo Chavez economic miracle.
It's a miracle. It's magic.
Oh gosh.
And this article is from David Sirota. And he writes, quote, with respect to many policies, Chavez was no saint. He, for instance, amassed a troubling record when it came to protecting human rights and basic democratic freedoms, though as Mark Weisbrot of the Center for Economic and Policy notes, Venezuela is recognized by many scholars to be more democratic than it was in the pre-Chavez era. His reign also coincided with the boom in violent crime. That said, these serious problems, while certainly worthy of harsh criticism, were not the primary reason Chavez became the favorite effigy of American politicians and pundits. Chavez became the bugaboo of American politics because his full-throated advocacy of socialism and redistributionism at once represented a fundamental critique of neoliberal economics and also delivered some indisputably positive results. Chavez racked up an economic record that a legacy-obsessed American president could only dream of achieving.
Oh, gosh.
You were holding in that laughter, weren't you?
Oh,
Waiting
yes.
for me to finish. Oh, I mean, this is just so much fail. Quote, Chavez's first decade in office saw Venezuelan GDP more than double. Yeah, because you can always trust economic statistics from socialist countries. They never lie about those. and both infant mortality and unemployment almost halved. Then there is a remarkable graph from the World Bank that shows that under Chavez's brand of socialism, poverty in Venezuela plummeted. All right, here's the reality of it. In 2013, the poverty rate in Venezuela was 32%. The average all over Latin America was 28%. And so there's really no reason to believe that it was anything other than a regression to the mean. But since then, it's only gone up. As of April 2016, according to the World Bank, his same source, 80% of Venezuela's population was below the poverty line.
And here's something even better, is that, quote, I love this one. It says, as evident by the treatment from everyone from Martin Luther King to Michael Moore to Oliver Stone to anyone who else dares question neoliberalism and economic imperialism, the punishment is all about marginalization. The kind that avoids egging on substance of fear or of allowing the notion of socialism to enter the conversation in the first place. Wow, this projection.
Yeah, and he also says, quote, Chavez came to be seen as a serious threat to the global system of corporate capitalism. It's not that he turned Venezuela into a crap hole and socialism doesn't work. It's a threat to capitalism.
Oh, man, this is beautiful, man. I wonder if they actually, it's amazing Google can find these little tidbits and such. This is right here. Likewise, in the United States, whose poverty rate is skyrocketing, are there any lessons to be learned from Venezuela policies that so rapidly reduces poverty?
Now, the poverty rate isn't skyrocketing in the United States. It is in Venezuela, but not here. But this was written in 2013, so double Bogon points if this guy also says anything about how great Obama has been for the economy.
Oh, yeah.
But I also like how he says, quote, at a moment when America faces a pivotal debate about taxation and the size of government in specific and free market fundamentalism in general. It's fundamentalism, Charlie.
Oh, my gosh. Yes, you're a fundamentalist, James. How dare you want people to have free choice and free way to use the market? How dare you, Shane?
Yeah.
It's all about the patriarchy.
And he says, that is by design. It is what the longtime caricaturing and marginalizing of Chavez was always supposed to do. But maybe now that the iconoclast is dead, the cartoon will end. Maybe now Chavez's easily ridiculed bombast can no longer be used to distract from Venezuela's record. It's Venezuela's record we've been looking at.
Yeah, I've been looking at this for a long period of time. In fact, most businesses have looked at it, and they skedaddled from Venezuela. And now the Venezuelans are eating fried rocks.
Now, this other one is an article from The Guardian, also from 2013, from Mark Weisbrot. We mentioned him earlier. He was mentioned in the other article. Quote, for more than a decade, people opposed to the government of Venezuela have argued that its economy would implode. Like communists in the 1930s rooting for the final crisis of capitalism, they saw economic collapse just around the corner. How frustrating it has been for them to witness only 2 recessions. Well, turns out all we had to do was wait 3 years.
Oh, gosh. I wonder if they're actually doing any recanting.
I looked. I didn't see any updates from either of them.
Oh, man. Cowards, man. Cowards. And about worse, they're still believing in this whole thing. They say fried rocks are a good thing. They're healthy for you. I guarantee you. In the next couple months, they'll probably have like how fried rocks have saved the Venezuelan economy somehow because of reasons.
The government got control of the national oil company in 2003, and the whole decade's economic performance turned out quite well, with average annual growth of real income per person of 2.7% and poverty reduced by over half, and large gains for the majority in employment, access to healthcare, pensions, and education. Because again, you can totally trust statistics from socialist countries. They've never lied about those.
No, they never lie, except when they do.
Now, Venezuela is facing economic problems that are warming the cockles of the haters' hearts. We see the bad news every day. Consumer prices up 49% over the last year, a black market where the dollar fetches 7 times the official rate. He means the manipulated set rate that's not allowed to move by market forces. Shortages of consumer goods from milk to toilet paper, the economy slowing, central bank reserves falling. Will those who cried wolf for so long finally see their dreams come true? Not likely. Except we did. 3 years later. Boom.
And they're all eating rocks and they can't find any toilet paper. And yet, no one talks about Venezuela anymore.
It was their baby. It was the thing they pointed to, say, look how great it is. And now, silence.
And even worse is that when, the people trying to get their, economy going, they want to have choice again. Guess what? The government is like shutting it down. And these people are so in on the socialism. They're so in on it. They're like, please, it has to work. I mean, I've never seen this devotion before.
It's a bit like those end of the world people who are all like, oh, the world's going to end in May. No, it's going to end in October. No, it's going to end next year. No, it's going to end the year after that. And they're still true believers, no matter how much the world just keeps on trucking.
It's just, and I'm always saying, if you really believe the world's going to end, let me have all your money then. They become quiet after that.
So he says, quote, in the opposition's analysis, Venezuela is caught in an inflation devaluation spiral where rising prices domestically undermine confidence in the economy and currency, causing capital flight and driving up the black market price of the dollar. This adds to inflation, as does, in their theory, money created by the government. And its price controls, nationalizations, and other interventions have caused more structural problems. Hyperinflation, rising foreign debt, and a balance of payments crisis will mark the end of this economic experiment. But how can a government with more than $90 billion in oil revenue end up with a balance of payments crisis? Well, the answer is it can't and won't. 3 years later, Venezuela's inflation rate is 720%, and according to the World Bank, it could reach 1,000% by the end of the year.
It's always the same thing. Chickens have not only come to roost, I think actually the chickens actually left from Venezuela too, so.
Yeah, because everyone else is munching on mica. One problem is that most of the central bank's reserves are in gold, but gold can be sold, even if it is much less liquid than assets such as U.S. Treasury securities. It seems far-fetched that the government would suffer through a balance of payments crisis rather than sell its gold. 3 years later, Venezuela is shipping out gold en masse. In January, they sent $1.3 billion worth of gold bars to Switzerland, and they're now negotiating with Deutsche Bank AG to carry out more gold swaps, and it really does seem like they're trying to liquidate the entirety of their gold holdings.
They're trying, but I don't think it's going to work out for them.
He also says hyperinflation is also a very remote possibility. I think we just covered that. And what really drove inflation up beginning a year ago was a cut in the supply of dollars to the foreign exchange market. How's that supposed to drive up inflation?
Magic.
And he also says, Venezuela has sufficient reserves and foreign exchange earnings to do whatever it wants, including driving down the black market value of the dollar and eliminating most shortages. Actually, there's a really good way to do both. It's called the free market price mechanism.
Nope, they don't want that, Shane. They don't want it because the free market is evil. It kicks puppies, and it makes fun of you when you try to speak.
And he reiterates the statistics on poverty that we've already covered, how the poverty rate dropped by 20% in Venezuela last year, almost certainly the largest decline in poverty in the Americas for 2012, and one of the largest, if not the largest, in the world. Well, because A, it's a regression to the mean, and B, they started out so crappy anyway, there pretty much wasn't any other way to go. But now, guess what? Back up, 80% in poverty.
Yeah. I think they actually are worse than Greece at this point.
Yeah.
And Greece right now is well,
I don't think they're talking about eating fried rocks in Greece.
Yeah, well.
Hi, I'm Dave. You may recognize me from previous Bogosity episodes. I'm also part of a podcast, the Superplugs Brothers Podcast. Head on over to superplugsbros.com. You can check out the podcast for video games and pro wrestling. We also have news, reviews, and editorials and all kinds of stuff just to talk about video games and pro wrestling and everything else that comes in between. So if you're into that, why don't you come check us out?
And now it's time to push me pull ya, this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it involves a bit of drama between Gizmodo and John McAfee. The thing is, this is definitely bogus enough to take the title, but in all honesty, I'm not sure which one to give it to. It's pretty much a he said, she said situation, but neither of them have any real credibility in my book.
Oh, then again, Gizmo is a part of, Gawker, so...
Is it?
I think it is.
Oh, boy.
If it is, well, they're not going to be around much longer, so... Yeah. Thank you, Hulk Hogan, for doing this great service.
And this is from William Turton, who writes, John McAfee apparently tried to convince reporters that he hacked the encryption used on WhatsApp. To do this, he attempted to send them phones with pre-installed malware and then convinced them he was reading their encrypted conversations. So that's Gizmodo's claim. Now, the idea that John McAfee or anyone else cracked WhatsApp's encryption is laughably unlikely, to say the least, because we covered this. They're actually using the same one that Signal uses, which is really solid. But McAfee claims that he was demonstrating something that every security expert knows, but which is good to point out to the masses. There are other ways of stealing your data. If a security flaw in WhatsApp allows a hacker into the storage of the messages, then the crypto is meaningless. And if there's a flaw in the Android OS that allows an attacker to put in malware, for example a keylogger, then it doesn't matter what the app does. The hacker can get every character you type, every text sent, every number dialed, everything. Cryptography is important, but so is endpoint security. The right piece of malware on your system can defeat anything.
That's true. I mean, you never know what each side is talking about because, again, Gawker notably is, well, full of crap.
I just looked it up. According to Wikipedia, Gawker Media does own Gizmodo, and they also own Kotaku and Jezebel and lots of other who we've gone against too. Yeah, so I knew they were bad, but geez, talk about it.
Yeah, so I am once again right. So I don't know, but yeah, John McAfee. The whole situation I read about this is very interesting. But again, with Gawker, with the whole Gawker cloud around Gizmo, I don't know who's lying here.
Yeah. He says, quote, according to cybersecurity expert Dan Guido, McAfee planned to send this reporter 2 Samsung phones in sealed boxes. Then experts working for McAfee would take the phones out of the boxes in front of the recorders, and McAfee would read the messages being sent on WhatsApp over a Skype call. According to sources who spoke to Gizmodo anonymously because they were not authorized by their employer to speak to the press. Gee, I love those anonymous sources.
Oh, yeah.
McAfee offered this story to at least the International Business Times and Russia Today. He also shopped the story to Business Insider. And then Guido says, quote, John McAfee was offering to a different couple of news organizations to mail them some phones, have people show up, and then demonstrate with those 2 phones that McAfee in a remote location would be able to read the messages as it was sent across the phones. I advise the reporter to go out and buy their own phones because even though they come in a box, it's very easy to get some saran wrap and a hairdryer to rebox them.
Huh?
Yeah, you can shrink wrap your own boxes again. It's not hard.
Well.
Hey, look at this. It's still in the shrink wrap. Yeah, okay. There's a difference between a magician who does a card trick and he holds up a deck of cards still sealed in the deck and one where the magician has you go out, buy the deck of cards, and he does it with that deck that you bought. So
yeah, it's a little bit of trickery.
So he said, quote, McAfee blamed Google and not WhatsApp for the exploit in the phone, but the article's headline claims that McAfee hacked WhatsApp. McAfee never actually claims to have hacked WhatsApp in the article, but says he found a serious flaw in the Android design. It seems that McAfee tried to peddle a lie to multiple reporters that he had hacked the encryption on WhatsApp, but then changed his story when reporters expressed concerns about their ability to verify this supposed hack. Now give me a break. How many times have we covered how headlines are written by marketing hacks to get clicks? If anyone would know about that, Gawker Media would.
Oh yeah, so...
I mean, it's not any sort of evidence that McAfee changed his story, so unless you can quote him directly saying, I cracked the encryption on WhatsApp, you don't have anything.
Exactly.
I mean, these guys are the kings of clickbait. Come on.
Yeah, it's clickbait. It's even worse so in this time of day and age. You just look at the headline and not read the whole dang old thing. At least when I look at these articles, I actually read them.
So we talked about Moxie Marlin Spike. He's with Open Whisper Systems, and he's the guy who developed the encryption system that Signal and WhatsApp both used. And he says, quote, I talked to McAfee on the phone. He reluctantly told me that it was a malware thing with pre-cooked phones, and all the outlets he'd contacted decided not to cover it after he gave them details about how it would work. But they did at least post McAfee's formal response, quote, I, perhaps wrongly, assume that people actually read articles that interest them rather than just headlines. If you actually read the article, which you apparently did not, I made it absolutely clear that this was not a WhatsApp issue. It was a Google issue. You slam me for tweeting an article whose headline you do not like. Surely the article is what is important, not the headline. If I am wrong, then we as a society are fucked. Please quote me word for word if you have the fucking balls, which I know in advance you do not. Of course the phones had malware on them. How that malware got there is the story, which we will release after speaking with Google, and involves a serious flaw in the Android architecture.
Boom.
Well, I guess we'll see who has egg on their face after McAfee releases the details of this flaw, if he ever does.
And if he does, just be on the pile for Gawker Incorporated. Just put it on the pile. That's just,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But, I mean, McAfee is not behaving like a proper security researcher would either, which is not going straight to the media saying, ooh, wow, look at this, but doing what he says he's done, just contact Google and say, hey, fix this, and then maybe after a reasonable amount of time, go ahead and publish the details of the flaw. But, I mean, this just seemed like another grab for attention in the media from him.
Yeah. Again, he's not the innocent. He was just trying to point the flaw. If he was going to point the flaw, talk to Google, talk about Amazon, since he is a lead, virus, he made the whole McAfee protection thing. Now, he does have the credibility, so
he actually doesn't have a lot of credibility anymore. He really doesn't.
I know, but once upon a time he did. He could have posted this like a couple months later after the whole thing fixed. By the time it's presidential thing, it would have been like...
Yeah, it happens at a time when he's trying to get a nomination for president, yeah.
Yeah. Either way, John McAfee's an idiot for trying to do this type of things, but Gizmodo is the bigger idiot for basically trying to fool people with these clickbaiting headlines, which is something that they should be learning not to do with the recent lawsuits.
So this week, we'll just leave it to you, the listener, to decide for yourself whether Gizmodo or John McAfee or both deserve the title of this week's biggest Bogon emitter.
I'm leaning towards Gawker. That's my thing.
I think I'm going with both. It's both. Now you can make Amazon purchases with Bitcoin by going to purse.bogosity.tv. That's P-U-R-S-E. Moreover, most purchases can be made at a discount. Save an average of 20% just by buying from Purse, or get even greater discounts by linking your Amazon wish list. Go to purse.bogosity.tv. Bogosity.tv is a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for sites to earn advertising fees by advertising and linking to Amazon.com. Just clear your cookies and go to amazon.bogosity.tv, or check the right-hand side of the podcast page for Amazon's best deals, including the deal of the day and limited-time lightning deals on all sorts of great products. So next time you buy online, go to amazon.bogosity.tv. And now let's spike the punch of this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. And this one comes straight from our "You have got to be kidding me" department. No, it's not The Onion. I checked. It's from the Washington Times. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is requiring bartenders in the city to serve alcohol to pregnant women. So this comes from guidelines from Blasio's Human Rights Commission, and I think that's one of those "I don't think that word means what you think it means" type of situations. And it's like some weird combination of discrimination and women's rights laws or something, talking about discriminatory stereotypes about what's in the best interest of the health of the fetus and how that shouldn't be permitted by law.
Wow. Did I not know anything about health?
Yeah.
I know good intent, trying to be equality and trying to say, well, if men can drink while women are pregnant, then women can drink when they're pregnant.
Yeah.
That's equality. Makes sense.
That says, quote, Judgments and stereotypes about how pregnant individuals should behave, their physical capabilities, and what is or is not healthy for a fetus are pervasive in our society and cannot be used as a pretext for unlawful discriminatory decisions in employment, housing, and public accommodations. So medical science is just a pretext,
It's sexist. It's the patriarchy.
Because science is done by cis white males,
Yeah.
But they specifically mention, as an example, quote, a restaurant policy that prohibits staff from serving pregnant individuals raw fish or alcohol.
That's what the thing is. You can't eat these things or drink these things when you're carrying a child. That's the sacrifice you have to do.
And another example says they can't deny, quote, a pregnant individual entrance to a bar based on the belief that pregnant individuals should not be going to bars and or drinking alcohol. That one I can kind of sort of see, because just because you're going into a bar doesn't mean you're drinking. You can drink, Coke and have some food or whatever, but still hang out with the regulars. But it's the fact that you can't refuse to serve them alcohol, and now that's considered discrimination. I mean, when is this going to be considered to have gone too far?
Well, since now humanist is now basically becoming humanist plus, Shane.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. It seems like it just continues, and SDAWs continue to infest a lethal dose of poison to anything, and they kill it, and it withers and dies. I think I was talking to Tim Dyson, and it says, it's funny how the only ones that actually are standing up and fighting against the SJWs are the gamers.
Yeah.
They're the ones actually standing up saying no, and, it's funny. It's like everyone else is just bending down saying, well, this, that, and the other, humanist plus, or atheist plus, or...
But it's like they're doing that to kind of give themselves credibility, like, if you're a humanist, then you have to be into social justice and all that. Well, no, because if you're a proper skeptic, you know how to properly defend a proposition, and that's not it. But if you could properly defend it, then why are you doing all this other stuff?
Yeah, I thought humanist is for humane rights for everyone. That's one of the main things I've learned about being a humanist. I mean, I recognize the ideals, and some parts of Christianity is more the humanist revolutions and such like that. It doesn't say, black revolution. It's separation. It separates people. It puts them in these little groups.
It's a separatist movement. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. And this, for example, is a dangerous one. To force bars to serve alcohol to pregnant women, they're caring for someone who is not in this world. And it could cause very, very serious harm to the child and to the woman who is pregnant. It's documented. It's facts. And I worry, because does he not realize what type of damage he's causing? It's worrying. It's very worrying that you're now having a law to force people against their own justice. What happens if someone says, no, I'm not going to serve this woman who's obviously pregnant? Are they going to go to jail? Get a fine? Are they going to lose their business? What's the punishment?
And it's just hard to think of anything else to say here, other than it's completely obvious that no one other than Bill de Blasio could possibly be this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this lesbian Nazi hookers abducted by UFOs and forced into weight loss programs edition of the Bogosity Podcast. Come join the discussion at forum.bogosity.tv and feel free to join in by sending a question, statement, news article, or rant in text or audio to podcast@bogosity.tv. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate using the links on the website or the QR codes on the YouTube video. You can also become a patron at patreon.bogosity.tv and get the podcast and YouTube videos early and without ads or promos. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Charles Thomas for joining me.
No problem.
Until next time, here's a quote from Milton Friedman. If the government were to take over the Sahara Desert, in 5 years, there would be a shortage of sand. The Bogosity Podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.
Want answers to creationist claims against evolution? Would you like to know more about evolution yourself, or even engage creationists more directly, with actual peer-reviewed sources to back you up? My book, How Evolution is Scientific, is designed to show the basics of evolutionary theory and how it is so well supported using the scientific method. It's impeccably sourced, with references to the actual scientific material, and is arranged using the creationists' own criteria of what is scientific. Using their own arguments against them, see how evolution is scientific, but creationism is not, based on observations, accurate predictions, logic, and evidence. Get answers to common creationist claims, and even a primer on abiogenesis, the start of all life. It's all in my book, How Evolution is Scientific, available at Amazon and on Kindle, EPUB, and PDF as well. Get How Evolution is Scientific and never be taken in by creationists again.
I know it's dangerous to look at the comments in any type of article, but here it is. I got like at least 2 good comments. They follow from one another. It says, quote, Steve R. from the article from the Blasio fiasco. It says, quote, the logic of the progressive left is preposterous. In the name of equality, pregnant women would be allowed to drink alcoholic beverages. Simultaneously, the left attempts to outlaw the consumption of some products that have negative health implications for the public good. The common logic of the progressive left has made the rule of law meaningless. And to comment of this is AeroDog2 says that's the idea. The communists didn't force the proletariat to mouth commie slogans to convince the proles, but rather to deflate their will to resist. If 20 times a day you are forced to say up is down, left is right, orange is purple, then the idea of truth flies right out the window. It is a logic designed to break your sense of reality, nothing less.